Good morning, Alison. I am delighted to have Alison Donaghey join me this morning with Domino Thinking, which is such an intriguing name. I met Alison recently at the Global Influence Summit down in San Diego, and I don't know about you, Alison, but I thought we connected right away. We got talking about our respective books and book launches and some of the things that we were doing as speakers, and you have a radio show that you host. So I felt a great connection right away.
I felt the same way. I think that was one of the beautiful things about this event was that I got to meet people like you and really connect in person. Because it's one thing to connect online, but it's another thing to have face to face like this. And yet another thing again to be live and sharing the same space. So yes, I definitely connected with you.
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah.
And you're doing some really intriguing things. So, as you know, I've been doing this series of interviews with influential, confident women as part of the lead up to my book launch. So the book is called Words, Women, and Wisdom: The Modern Art of Confident Conversations. It's going to look like this.
I know, it's such a great cover.
Thank you. So I'm still crossing my fingers for the end of April in terms of a timeline for that.
Mm-hmm.
And as part of that insight, I was hoping to gather just a little bit from you, because as I met you, I felt this confidence emanating from you. So I was intrigued to gather some insights from you, and also just to hear a little bit more about your story. So for those who haven't met or never heard of Alison yet, Alison is a speaker, author, radio host, and she is helping to get the world thinking in opposite ways. Unusual ways. You call it domino thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit about how that got started.
Well, I think I've always been that kind of thinker from the time that I was little, in that somebody would say something, I'd be like, what about this side? What about this perspective? Excuse me. And so a couple of years ago, somebody heard me speak at an event and they said, oh my God, you have to do this professionally. And I was like, well, I do kind of enjoy it. And what I really love afterwards is when people come up at the end and say, hey, I never thought of it that way. And, there's that expression, you keep getting, with the same thinking, you keep getting what you've always got, or however that goes. And I just see us as a society making the same mistakes over and over and over again. We get so attached to our rightness that we lose sight of the fact that there's another person on the other end thinking they are right as well. And so hopefully with this think opposite, we can actually start understanding the perspective of the other so we can have conversations and stop trying to convert each other.
So how does that translate into business in terms of what you're offering to your clients? What do you actually do with that? Because it sounds really interesting. I'm not sure I have a full handle on how that translates to what you're doing to help clients move forward.
Well, I have had my own house painting business for 20 years, so I know an awful lot about business, and I've written a business book. And when we get into business, we often look at other people and go, oh, I guess that's how it's done.
Right.
But if we take that step further and see, are they getting the results that I want? Often that's not the case. So when I was starting my house painting company, I would look at the way the guys were doing it and I'd be like, oh, I don't want to be doing business like this. So how can I do it differently? Right. So then I would think of what is the opposite of what they are doing. And then I would start at the opposite and go, well, is that a good fit? And then start moving back towards what is more conventional until I found a place that felt really good to me. So a lot of what I do in my business is very unconventional. It's very different than what other businesses do. And I think that when we bring our own sense of self and our sense of purpose and who we want to see when we look into the mirror into our business, we will find that often that typical business model doesn't work for us.
Oh, this is resonating so well right away. I'll tell you why. I had coffee a number of years ago with Michael Lozier, who wrote the Law of Attraction book. And he has a great concept which he gave me permission to share with my clients. And it's the concept of the T. This is like a big capital T, and it's called clarity through oh shoot, now it's this, the words have escaped me.
Oh, it'll come back to you at 3:00 in the morning.
Yeah. clarity through conflict? No, that doesn't sound right. Anyway, basically what you're doing is, if you are unhappy with a particular situation, you put, whatever the problem is that you're working on above the line to keep your focus. And then on the left side of the T, you write down all the things you don't like about that particular clarity through contrast. There we go.
Oh, I like it.
What you don't like about the situation on the one side, and then it's much easier to then flip that and to say the opposite. If I don't like being micromanaged by my boss, the opposite of that would be to be an independent worker and to have ownership and accountability to myself and just report in.
Right.
So because sometimes we don't know what we want.
And we often, as human beings, know what we don't like. It's really easy for us to say, oh, I don't like that, and I don't like that, and I don't like that. But we never take that extra step like you're talking about and go, but what do I like?
Yes.
And sometimes I think it's because I think as human beings, we tend to be commitment phobes. And so that we think, oh, I don't like micromanaging. But if we say, I want independence, that's scary. So we don't say it. We stay in this comfortable space of saying, I don't want to be micromanaged.
Yeah. Well, you and I know, because I know that you've been out speaking as well. Women's conferences, I've seen your name speaking as a speaker for women. Power, I think you spoke at that.
Yeah, I did. That was actually the thing that started it all.
Was it? Oh,
yes.
I'd love to hear that story in a moment. But when we're out, speaking with others, it is all about transformation and change. Typically, we're speaking, we want to share an insight, a message, and then at the end, hopefully, the audience will say, I've got to step into this change. And then that little amygdala steps in, keeping us from, safety, flight or fight. And so we know that change is hard. So yeah, tell me about that experience. Was that your biggest audience or one of your most enjoyable audiences that you spoke to there?
Well, you know what? The interesting thing is that I didn't think it was going to be a thing for me. I didn't spend all that much time thinking about it. But I spoke about how we often show up as somebody other than who we are. And as women, I don't think we're as far along the evolution as we seem to think we are. Okay. I think we have a long way to go. And because we post on Facebook, hey, we're empowered, makes us think we're actually empowered. But it goes so much further than that. And so I'm actually working on a movement right now called #MyPart.
Ooh.
And I'm speaking to people about that. I just did a speech in Vancouver about the #MeToo movement. Yep. And as long as we're pointing fingers at other people, we're not being accountable for our own things. And whether that's in business, I'm not being successful because that guy moved in down the street. I'm not being successful because I'm a woman. I'm not being successful because I'm Black or Chinese or First Nations or whatever excuse that we're making, until we actually bring that back to see how we are contributing to that problem. Do we actually see change? Which I don't even think answered that question that you asked. Sorry, I get really excited about this. So what was the question again? Speaking to audiences? No, that's not my biggest audience. But it certainly has fondness for me because it was my breaking out, I guess, of lack of a better word.
Okay, well, again, I echo what you're talking about because I referenced the Me Too movement and Time's Up in the intro part of the book.
Right.
I started writing it last January, and of course, at that point, there wasn't, Bill Cosby, I don't think had even been on trial at that point. And so I think part of the reason why it wasn't ready last March is because the world wasn't ready for it then.
Probably.
Yeah. It was far ahead of its time. Whereas now I believe that there is an appetite, and you're so true when you're talking about, what is our part? I mean, if we want to see change, we have to make the change. I'm working, coaching, leaders. Very often I'll hear something along the lines of, oh, well, they don't respect me. Well, do you respect them? No. Okay, well, they're going to feel it and see it,
Right.
They don't trust me. Well, do you trust them? Right. It's got to start here first and then emanate out from that.
Yeah, so, exactly.
Yeah, I love what you're saying there. So how does this connect do you think, Alison, to confidence? Where do you think confidence comes from? Could we start there? Because that's the essence of the book.
Right. I think confidence definitely comes from within. I think it's that the more we know ourselves, the more confident we can be.
Yeah.
So when I was younger and starting in business, I sure acted confident and people thought I was, but I was still freaking out inside. But as I've grown older and I've done more work on myself and I've accepted more of my part in my life, that's where the confidence came from. Because when we see ourselves and we understand and we trust our instincts, our intuition, and it works, then become more confident. We become to get to that place of, oh, I thought this could work and it did work. And oh, that feels really good. And we start to trust ourselves more.
Yeah. Right.
So when we can accept ourselves for who we are and trust ourselves to make the right choices, I think that's definitely where confidence comes from. And then, of course, it doesn't hurt to surround yourself with people who believe in you. That's always a great thing.
Absolutely. When you're having those moments of doubt, knowing that you have a support network or a support framework to connect back to just sort of check in and say, hey, am I on the right path here? Am I, is this like making sense that I'm taking this action? And bounce ideas off another person. It's huge. As you probably know, I chair mentorship programs as one of my contributions to helping women advance. And I'm excited this week because I'm actually getting matched up with my new mentor from the EBC.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, so I haven't had a mentor myself for a few months. So I want to make sure that I tap into that advantage, because support is huge, especially for women, because that's how very often we make decisions. That's one of the distinctions between how we operate versus our male counterparts, is we like to collaborate, we like to brainstorm, we like to make comparisons, we like to know that we've invited in other opinions or other people, so that we're showing that caring, nurturing side, right, while we're doing what's good for us as well.
I think that is definitely a really good point. And I think going back to that hashtag Me Too movement, that we're doing ourselves an awful lot of damage because we're not actually thinking about what that movement is about. And I've talked to so many people who don't want to hire women because of that movement. They just see us as more problems than we're worth. I was talking to one guy who has a rather big company, and he has quite a few managers, and they're mostly male. But what happens is when they bring in another manager, they get mentored by a more senior manager.
Right.
But none of these senior managers actually want to be left alone in a room with women. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. And so I think we need to have this awareness about that as well as we're moving forward and we're asking for our mentors, because it is a risk for the other person to mentor us. We want it to be a good fit. We want it to be a win-win. But how do we get past this fear now that we are creating? I think it's really, really challenging. And I do agree with you. Mentors are really important. It's really important to have those people behind us that see us as our future self, so that we can see ourselves as our future self. And to eliminate those people who want to, keep us down because it's more comfortable for them.
That's one of my biggest purposes, I think, in life, is helping women step into their greatness and not stay. So with that question around, what's been coming up with those discussions, or with that comment rather, from a mentorship standpoint, what do you think is critical that we do as individuals when we're stepping into those relationships? Because I know a lot of women want a male mentor because they're working predominantly in a male world, so they want to have that perspective. What do we need to do differently, do you think?
Well, I'm always about open conversations.
Yeah.
So if it was me going into that situation, I'd say, hey, you know what? Like, I know all of this stuff is going on out there, and this is my perspective on it.
Right.
And just put it out there, have a conversation about it. And I think the elephant in the room is always more dangerous than just speaking up, because if people are already uncomfortable with it and you say this and it makes them uncomfortable, well, they're already uncomfortable.
Right.
But at least now there is a platform of communication.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to confidence, what else do you think helps to elevate women's confidence? Is there one or two words in particular that resonate for you, or one or two concepts that you've seen work really well?
Well, I definitely think personal accountability is huge. And I think that's huge in everything, in case you hadn't noticed with my part. When we're able to own our stuff and say, oh, I made a mistake, or, oh, you might know more than me. Can you please share what you know? I think that is a huge way of building connection, and the connection helps confidence. So I think whenever we're moving to be that that inquisitive, curious person, and then we were seeking out answers, we find out where those answers can come from. We implement those in change. I think that's where we get confident. You know, I wasn't confident when I created my first estimate template for my painting company. And I was like, this isn't how anybody else does it. But then my customer said, that's why I hired you. And I went, oh, I did this right. This is good. This is working. And that's, you know, I'm building on that. Yeah. And keeping note of it too on those days when you're feeling down.
This is just so funny, Alison, because these are a number of the things that I've been talking with this week about with my clients. Right?
Yeah. Well, similar minds.
Yeah. How are you, how is your boss measuring your performance?
Mm-hmm.
Not sure. Well, that's first thing you got to get clear on, so that you know you're working on the right stuff.
Yeah.
And then the piece about accountability is absolutely huge, right? I mean, it's one of Jack Canfield's 21 success principles. I think it's number one. Take responsibility for your
well, and if it's not, it should be.
I'm pretty sure it is number one. Yeah. Start there.
Yeah.
It's training a while ago. And then the other piece is about being curious, because one of the concepts I talk about in the book is about appreciative inquiry. Right? And I'm not sure
I like it.
Run across that piece before.
I don't know. It sounds familiar, but feel free to carry on.
Well, I talk about it quite a bit with sales situations where a lot of times people go into a new client and they're saying, tell me about your greatest challenge. Well, that's great for fleshing out a pain point. However, as you say, is that really how you want to do business? You want to start by putting the client in an uncomfortable position under a microscope and talking about this horrible thing that they probably created a few months ago with a bad decision and now causing a mess. So instead, starting with what's working really well already, and then how could it be even better? So it's appreciating what is working and then inquiring into what the possibilities are. Starting there as a place for conversation, which is more likely to build collaboration, and it doesn't result in any objections because there's nothing to object to. We're talking about a future possible statement. And then I also love, I'm curious. So that's a phrase I use a lot instead of just coming out and saying, well, why, blah, 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 which sometimes for a...
I usually lead with, why? I'm that why person. Maybe I should choose, I'm curious a little more often. Well, I'm impatient as well, right? So I just tell me now.
Well, I am too. However, I know that if I invest the energy on the front end, building the relationship, I get to the answer quicker on the back end. But if it's working, hey, leave it alone. For me, it works better because I can come across a little bit too strong for me to say, I'm curious about that. Tell me a little more about how that works versus why does it work like that? Because then people kind of squirm.
Yes. And I think this is part of a feminine approach and a masculine approach, right? And I think because we are built up of both the feminine and the masculine, right? I tend to let's fix it now. Let's fix it. And I often have to work on my more feminine approach of the collaboration piece and that gentler entry. But when we can accept that there's masculine and feminine in all of us, then we can start appreciating maybe in the other people what we are, for lack of a better word, lacking, or what we need to build up and get that balance. And it's an adventure. And I think it all is an adventure. And I think if we can see it as an adventure, we are less tied to the fear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a chapter in the book which is all about no words being required. And so part of that is to do with our energy and our presence and our body language.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other part is to do with words that deflate us. And so I think, as you just shared, if we're aware of, what are some of the words that come across sounding more masculine, what are the words that are more of a feminine energy, more collaborative and nurturing,
Mm-hmm.
and knowing when we need to draw on each of those.
Yeah.
Once we know that, then I believe we can show up more confidently, because we can be more predictive of what the outcome is.
Right. And that having been said, I think it's really important that we don't necessarily change what feels right to fit some sort of perceived balance. Right. Like, I'm very comfortable saying why. Like, tell me, I want to know. And I think if I change that, I might come across as inauthentic. I don't know, but I will play around with it.
I think the way that you're saying it, right,
Mm-hmm.
is you're saying it, you're leaning in, you're laughing, you're saying, I'm curious, without even saying it. And why, right? So it's different than when you're saying it with a different body language.
Like, why are you doing that? Like, that is totally different. Yeah.
Yeah. Different energy.
I know. My son tells me I do that.
Intention. Yes.
Yes.
So when you've had really confident people showing up on the radio show,
mm-hmm.
how does that change the audience participation, or how does that impact what your work is overall?
It definitely changes the way the interview takes place.
Mm-hmm.
It's much easier to interrupt a confident person and say, can I get clarification on that? Because I don't know what that means. And if I don't know what it means, there's a chance my audience doesn't know what it means. And they don't get flustered. It's much easier for them to go, oh, yeah, okay, it means this. And then they can get back on track with what they're saying. And because it is about trying to get information out, interruption is part of the thing. Yeah. With people who are less confident, it does give off an energy that people shy away from. In fact, I was talking to somebody the other day who called me up to do some questions about interviewing styles, because she wants to be interviewed more often. And she was coming across as apologetic. So when we worked on that, it became more of, this is what I believe in. We can have a conversation about it, but this is what I believe in. It changed the way I was able to interview her. And so if it changes how I interview her, then it would change how people heard her as well.
Absolutely.
So it's such a package deal.
Yeah. So, and this whole topic of confidence and conversations, if there was, one or two nuggets from your experience, different life experiences, building a business, running a radio show, speaking, writing, a bunch of things I've left out already, consulting, what do you think makes the biggest difference? What would you share? What nuggets would you share with the listeners around confidence?
I always say, try to converse, not convert. I think we are in a society where we're polarized, and because I'm right, I can only stay right if I make you agree with me.
Right.
And I agree. And I think if I can say, this is what I believe and this is what you believe, and we can have a conversation, we might end up closer together at the end. But we're not coming on in that attack of, you need to agree with me. Yeah. And I think when we can move away from that, we can move more into collaboration. Yeah.
Respecting the differences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely.
And certainly, you probably didn't know this, but earlier on in my HR career, before I moved into coaching, I interviewed and hired about 6,000 people.
Wow.
And what I realized was, values is a very, very key piece to having a great match. It's a marriage or a relationship or employer relationship. Because if you think it's black and I think it's white, we're never going to agree in the middle that it's gray.
Right.
So, bring your whole self with all of your black flavor, right, to a company that appreciates that darker side. As opposed to trying to fit, a black square peg in a white round hole and wondering why it's not working.
Right.
So it's about knowing where we started off. This is coming full circle, isn't it? Knowing yourself really well and how you show up. What is the best environment in order for you to flourish? And then go find that environment or create it as you've done with your business.
Well, and there's that expression out there, hire somebody you don't like. Because, and not to say you don't like them as a person, but you don't like what they like. And when I hire my assistant, I don't hire them for big picture ideas. I hire them for details. I want them to be meticulous. I am not meticulous. I need that in somebody else. So we do need that black and white in order to have a well-rounded business to include all of those shades of gray. But we do need it. And it's like you say, how you show up as the black or the white, willing to appreciate and accept, makes a big difference.
Yeah. And I believe that there are, certainly technical skills, right? The skills that you have, big picture thinking. Yeah, you definitely want to have an assistant who's the opposite there, so that it's a complement. Although if one of your values is, strong customer service, and you hire someone whose value, which is sort of underneath the technical skills, doesn't have that same value, that they think it's okay to just schleck something together, it's going to be a rub pretty quick. Yeah, it is. I do an sorry. I say the same thing with building teams, is look for those technical skills and competencies that are a complement. Yeah. You were saying?
Right. Yeah. Well, when I do interviewing for my painting company, because we hire a lot of people for summer work, and so I bring in like 15 applicants and we do a group interview, and I get them to just basically play games. And I have my crew, my existing solid, like my year-round crew, come in and they just observe and they think, oh, I think there's going to be a problem with this person, or this person will be so good because of the way that they were doing this activity. And that comes down to that thinking opposite, doing things differently. Like one-on-one interviews, I don't do them. I would for an assistant, but not for a painter, because it's a team environment. And so whenever we can think about doing things differently, and we can look at other businesses and go, oh, I could take that little piece, build it into this, and now have my own way of doing it.
Yeah, lovely. So, just to be respectful of time,
yes,
I really have enjoyed hearing some of your insights and nuggets. That really, really valuable, Alison. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for having me.
I'd like to open up that conversation. I don't know if there's anything particular that you have that you would like to share with the audience, but this would basically be a great time to do that.
Share as in
some sort of gift offer.
Oh, yeah.
That, if they want to take, they like what you're doing, they want to take it further. Oh,
yeah. So this is my book.
Okay.
Think opposite. So if somebody wants to contact me, I would be happy to send off a PDF, a hard copy, or an audio version. Okay. They can contact me at info@dominothinking.com.
info@dominothinking.com.
And I do answer all of my emails. It sometimes takes me a little while, but I do personally answer them. And if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to have a conversation around it.
Awesome. Well, I'm definitely going to apply because I want a copy.
All right. Fair enough.
Great. Well, Alison, thank you so much for sharing. And I'm certainly looking forward to being on the radio show as well. I think. Yes,
it'll be great.
Lovely reciprocity.
Yes.
And appreciate your insights. Some great, really deep nuggets came out of this conversation, which doesn't surprise me at all.
Well, thank you.
That would be the case. Think opposite. This is Alison Donaghey, and live from Nanaimo, is it?
Nanaimo, West Coast, Canada.
Yes, and I thank you very much for sharing your insights. And with your permission, I'd like to leverage this interview and share it with the bigger audience that I have building with anticipation for the book coming out. My book.
Absolutely. Thank you. I know I'm so excited for your book. And I hope you talk about that cover piece, because it was such an interesting story about how you, your story around your cover.
Well, I'll probably do that on another one because
Yes.
we jam-packed this one already.
Yes, we have. But because I think it's a great way for people to understand and connect with you. And it is a good story. So stay tuned for whenever she shares that story.
Yeah. Well, there's another one I'm going to share with you offline.
Okay.
That connects with that story too.
All right. Terrific.
Anyway, now we've piqued your interest.
That's right. You're just going to have to stick around.
Yeah, I'll post a Facebook post a little bit later on once this story kind of comes full circle, because there's more pieces to it.
Right. Yes.
Thank you, Alison. Great insights on the topic of confidence, and hopefully the audience has taken away some new insights or refreshed on some of the most important things, and certainly taking accountability for your own learning is a key one. So if you're listening to this, you're already doing it. So have a great day. Thank you, Alison. Bye for now.
Thank you so much. Bye.